Right. Okay, what were the other kind of big results at the weekend? Let's go to Pittodrie. Let's go to the early game, which took place on Saturday afternoon. One each between Aberdeen and Celtic. Bojan Majowski giving the host the lead after Aberdeen were very much second best in the first half. Celtic had a goal disallowed after a lengthy VAR check. They had other chances to take the lead, couldn't really do it. And Aberdeen, they didn't look like there was going to be any kind of reaction from dispensing with their manager. They were just very much second best over the park. Second half, completely different story. Aberdeen as good if not better than Celtic in that second half. Scored the goal, had other chances to win the game, but Celtic gets a escape with a point with Kuhn coming off the bench to make his debut and getting a goal set up by a wee kind of layoff from Adam Idah, as well as the new boys combined to make sure this game wasn't that bad for Celtic. But it's just another example of, like, think of Celtic last season. So under Ange in the first campaign, they were, very good, especially as the campaign drew to a close. Very, very good. But there were still points, even in the latter half of that season, when Celtic could be got at. Like, especially like the last 20 minutes of games when they maybe kind of ran out of steam a bit and they're kind of high pressing that kind of took its toll on their legs, and especially at the end of a long campaign. I mean, you saw that with Rangers beating them in the Scottish Cup semi-final when Rangers had just been playing in Europe a few days earlier, that Rangers looked the more fitter team in extra time. And that was just because I think the Celtic style of play. But even when they were very good that season, there was points, and especially early in the campaign, that they could be got at. Last season, they were just so dominant. Like, they just absolutely laid waste to anybody. And any game that they looked a bit susceptible, they scored twice at injury time or once at injury time or something, and they pulled out a result regardless. To go for that, and to only really... They lost Jota. And Hatate's missed a lot of the season through injury. But that's about it. And to see that team go from that to this...
That is the two best players.
That's a fair thing to
Kyogo going off the boil, which, don't get me wrong, could partly be Rodgers' issue. That's the three best players instantly dropping off. And this isn't a defence of them, but I think through this you're going to find that it's no surprise that the teams that are really struggling, Ross County, Celtic, relatively speaking, and Hibs, is none of them know what their best team is, and they're chopping and changing every week. And with Ross County, they're chopping and changing shape as well most weeks and during the game. So the Celtic just do not. They, like, as you say in this game, with Hatate not being there, they actually lost control of the game in the second half. It wouldn't happen with Hatate there and used correctly.
That's true.
He keeps the ball game taken over. But there's no excuse. That's not an excuse. It's a reason, but it can't be used as an excuse because Celtic have so much resources that shouldn't be the case. That if we remove one player, even their best, from them, that there should be the amount of issues that they're having in almost a weekly basis now against pretty much anyone. The style of the team, they do it against the worst teams in the league, and they do it against the better teams in the league. It can rear its head at any point.
Yeah, and I think positives for Celtic. Well, they should have the game out of sight in the first half. I mean, it's no good excuse. They have to expect Aberdeen to do something to step it up a bit in the second period. But they should have the game out of sight, but before then, they're just a bit wasteful in the final third. And that's, talk about guys not performing. Like you said, you mentioned Kyogo, Abada. Just keep forgetting he's come back from injury. I keep thinking he's out. I think he came back in December. Like, he's just not really done anything since then. And
it seems like his head's elsewhere, eh? They're just going by the little snippets you get in the media about, and obviously not too impressed about how the Celtic fans talk about, obviously, the war. And I'm really not going into any depth here, the war in his homeland. And that seems to... And it probably would rub you up the wrong way, whether I agree with the Celtic fans or not. And I think that...
whether you agree with Abad or not, or whether you agree that he's been, he's
what his country's doing or whatever. That would have an effect on you.
If you believe in your own country and if you're patriotic and you think what your country's doing is right, regardless of whether that's actually the case or not,
true or not,
you're going to probably feel that tension.
And it sounded like the noises again. I don't have any facts. I don't have any insight into Celtic. Noises were he was probably angling for a move. in January. That's what it sounded like to me. But Celtic are in no position to be letting guys of Abadah's standard when he's at his best to go. So it's just another in the long line of like small issues that seem to be snowballing for Celtic, and you feel like you're on the they're struggling all the time, but you feel like you're maybe on the edge of full-blown crisis might happen.
Yes.
And there's also the issue because the fans are ready to go for Rodgers' throat anyway because he's not popular. So you've got that added part of it. At least even with Neil Lennon, it took a bit of time to get to the point where they were wanting his head on a stake because of who he was. But Rodgers, they'll be ready to go the second Rangers get above them. They'll go off on one.
I said this in the group chat on, I think it was Saturday. It was either Saturday or Sunday where I was saying, like, I actually think Rangers are going to win the title now. But I've kind of started to roll that back now a little bit. I think it's because Celtic are missing key players. Hatate's out. Maeda's obviously away. I still think that if they get, like, you just look at the team and you look at the team of the last season, you're still like, right, it just needs, like, because it can go one way. You get the feeling that there could possibly be a collapse from the Celtic team because the vibes are completely off. But it also could just be that they get these guys back and then everything clicks again and it's fine. And Abadah starts scoring.
It doesn't have to be perfect for them to win the league either.
No, exactly. And Rangers are still more than capable of dropping points, like against kind of similar opposition. But so also as well. So Adam Idah, he made his debut. Now, if you follow us on TikTok or Instagram, you'll see Ewan saying in a Patreon podcast we done last week that he thinks it's a terrible signing for Celtic because he's somebody in his career who has never really scored goals. And he not only doesn't really score goals, he didn't really get chances to score goals. And that doesn't sound ideal if you're Celtic. You want somebody with good movement around the penalty box. You always think like, if you give somebody to Celtic or Rangers who's like good at finishing but doesn't really get their own chances, that they'll do fine because like they'll just get loads of chances on a plate. But no, you still need good movement in the penalty area to do that because there's about 1 billion bodies back there all the time. And every time the ball kind of went into the Aberdeen penalty area, I was looking at him and like, because I was thinking, Ewan's going to look like a fanny. And because I was on the video with him, I'm going to look like a fanny as well if this guy scores on his debut. But he never really like scoring. I was like, he looked fucking pish. But I've went back and had a look. Do you know what he looked good at? He looked good at playing the part of a number 9 who's going to do more than score goals. And it's not really worked all season with Kyogo being asked to do that. It doesn't suit him as much. I don't know why Rodgers asked him to do it. We've talked about this loads of times.
Yeah, me and you especially, yeah.
Yeah, it's a mistake for the manager. He should be just letting Kyogo do what he does, which is he does
score 40 goals.
He does play a part in the build-up, but he's just so deadly at just arriving in the box to side foot or a low cross home. Get your team to do that for him, and then you'll just score loads of goals. But for whatever reason, Rodgers didn't want to do it. Idah, to me, looked like somebody that could do that, but his career would suggest he's not going to score a lot of goals himself. So you're still, even with Kyogo not scoring a lot this season, you're losing a goal threat from that. And then you need somebody like Abadah to get back to his best. You need me because
he's a proper goal scorer. He scores like a forward. He scores like a striker. The goals he scores are like a striker. He plays the wide area like a striker. He's more of a, to go into technicalities, like an inside forward rather than a winger. And that used to work really well because Jota would go wide and the balls come in, and then they basically with other players, it would end up that you basically got 2 strikers. Celtic could afford to have that from a wide player.
And then Palma as well. Palma's gone off the boil a little bit recently. He needs to just rediscover his early season form. So the pathway is certainly there for Celtic to motor away again and to take full advantage of any Rangers slip-ups. But at the same time, it's really kind of a balancing case here as I'm talking about this. On the verge of meltdown, could easily get it together in the next couple of weeks. Just go either way.
I was just waiting for you to use the word for a Celtic striker to be called a facilitator. And Celtic strikers, I'm sorry, can't be called facilitators. They can't be. That is a name for Ross County, St Johnstone. These are their strikers can be called facilitators. Celtic strikers cannot be. They must.
Well, who knows?
They must.
He might score loads of goals just because it's like we've seen players come up before. We're not great scoring records and score goals in the Scottish Premiership. So it could just happen that way. But I certainly kind of saw what Ewan was talking about when I was watching him move around the penalty area on Saturday. Right.
And then we're seeing the issues from, no, but like for the Aberdeen point of view, we see the issues. The back line comes up for that Miovski goal. You've got Scales and Naroki at the back. I mean, they've got, like, Miovski, it's a great goal. It's a great goal, and he's so deadly, and he shuffles. He should never be able to come inside there. He's left-footed as well. He should never, ever, ever be able to do that. Like against Hearts with the one disallowed, it was because of what happened before that allowed that space for him to get the exact scenario that he wants. But still, just from an Aberdeen point of view, from Miovski's point of view, he's just getting deadly, man. It's proper, like, that's one chance stuff. He's having to beat a defender, sort of turn him inside out. He's getting a chance with a ball over the top. So much to do, but you fancy him when he gets into the position. And it's an absolutely, like, top-class finish. And we've spoken about this before, but even from, he was a goal scorer last season, he has come on leaps and bounds. And the fact that he's had a problem with managers and he's doing it in a team that has struggled, is quite incredible, actually, for him to
all the players like around him have struggled.
Yeah. And he's like the beacon of light for the whole team. And if I was another manager of a certain level, I used to scoff at some of the names that he was getting linked to, but now I'm like, he can pretty much do. He's not going to be the best striker in the world, obviously, but he can pretty much do everything you would want a striker to be. He's like a really, really rounded forward, and he was the polar opposite of that last season. He just looked like a poacher who couldn't play with his back to goal. And he's got faster. He's also got faster, and that is possible to do. But he's like, his sprints are much better, and just I have to take my hat off to him to have done that, because I get the feeling he's kind of done it by himself rather than through any sort of coaching. But I don't know if that's true. That might be being completely unfair.
Yeah, probably. But it does feel like that just because they've been that bad this season, apart from him. I mean, some of the other players have played right. Like, McGrath's been good, and Polvara's kind of came on a bit as well. But yeah,
and Devlin.
Yeah, Devlin's been a decent enough signing.
They went with the four at the back, and obviously Duke still was out the team. But I think there was like maybe a return to form for Graham Shinnie from what I saw with the well balance. I know he missed the sitter, but he looked like
but you've got to score that chance, man. You've got to score it.
You've got it. Because you go and win the game. That team, the Celtic team, didn't look like they had it in them to probably come back. Even the goal that they got to get back in the game had lots of elements of luck to it. It's so they didn't look like Aberdeen probably could have stopped them. And another worry for Celtic is that once Aberdeen got to grips with them defensively, because in the first half, I thought Aberdeen, I only got to see the first half, then I went to Easter Road, unfortunately. But in the first half, Aberdeen didn't look that switched on. They were all over they were all at sea. The back four wasn't well set. It looked really worrying. It looked like a team that had just lost their manager, and there was a bit of chaos around. But they sort of got to grips with it, and that's another problem for Celtic. Playing against a team, they struggled to score against a team who were defending poorly. Not great from a Celtic point of view. So yeah, but fair play to Aberdeen. They made a bit. And what about Roos? I thought you might want to talk about. He made a few big saves, but also he looked all at sea at points.
Well, we should probably move on. We're already done half an hour. We've got 4 games to go. We're on a bit of a time limit as well. But I said it like after the midweek goals, like Kel Roos. I'd said when we done that podcast, we drafted the players out of contract. What was that, last month? Was that only last month? Was that? Yeah, last month. That didn't think Roos has had a good season. And since then, he's made a couple of big errors in Scottish Premiership games. And yeah, he seems to have not quite fallen off a cliff to the same extent of Shamal George at Livingston, but he's had a mini drop. He's done a bit of cliff jumping, like when you just jump in the water. it's not terminal or anything. He's no longer at an elevated height. What the fuck am I talking about? Right, anyway, let's move on.